Do you have a hobby that you do right now that you currently enjoy? Or do you wish you had a hobby but haven't had time to get it started? I can say that I've got a new hobby, and that's doing this podcast. I took on this journey a few months ago, and I have to say, it's totally been worth it and been quite a fun little experience. I'm going to share why I got this started, what was going through my mind, and how it all came to be. This is How to Speak Nebraskan. I get asked a lot, why did I start this podcast? And to be honest with you, there's probably several reasons of why I started it. But here's kind of just a few reasons I started it and kind of my process as to sort of how it came to be. First off, I'll just give this simple answer. It just kind of sounded like something fun to do. We all have these things that we enjoy doing. Do you ever get asked, hey, what are your hobbies? What is it you like to do for fun? What do you like to do to relax? I've always been a fairly avid runner. I started running track and cross country in high school, and I ran for many years, lots of half marathons and 10Ks and a few marathons, and had a running group of friends that became some of my really good friends and really close to. I don't really run as much anymore. And part of it, I think, is just getting a little bit older and the body not wanting to do it quite as much as I did before. But it's also just because I had other interests. I've always enjoyed being creative and having a creative outlet. And I think just about everybody has these thoughts they want to do where they want to try a new hobby or try something new and just kind of give it a shot. And that's kind of how I felt about this podcast. I've actually been thinking about starting a podcast for quite some time. I really never knew what I wanted it to be about or what I would call it necessarily. And then last summer, I was painting my deck and I was listening to podcasts on my AirPods. This was over the course of the whole summer, just random evenings and weekends. It took me way longer than it should have between scraping off paint and buying new paint and cleaning things up and everything going along with that. And over time, it just kind of came to me. I'm like, I want to do a podcast that highlights things related to Nebraska. I want to do a podcast that's fun. I want to do something that could be meaningful, but could be light. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to do it all. I couldn't really narrow it down. And then just kind of this How to Speak Nebraskan title came to me. And I just thought, what I like about this is that it really kind of indicates that you're focusing mostly on things from Nebraska. In fact, I get asked a lot, hey, Jeff, what are you, how's the podcast going? It's been interesting when I'm out with people or around a group of people. I'll have people say, hey, Jeff, how's your podcast? And then somebody else is like, oh, you have a podcast? What's your podcast about? It's an interesting question to answer because I don't have a real direct answer. I usually just say, well, it's called How to Speak Nebraskan. And what I like about that answer is it's kind of an answer with some gray area. How to Speak Nebraskan. What is it about? Well, if you hear that, you probably think, well, it's probably got something to do with Nebraska. What would that be? And so I generally say I highlight all things good and great about Nebraska and kind of what's going on. And sometimes I interview people or I just kind of do my own take on things. For the most part, I've done interviews on here, and I love doing interviews. I will say it's given me an opportunity to reach out to some people who have done some really cool things, and I've had an opportunity to get to know people that I've never met before. Sometimes I've met individuals that have been recommended to me from others, like, you really should interview this person. Other times I read about them in the paper or see them on the news. Sometimes it's just people who I know, and they've done something that I think is interesting, and I feel like they have a story to share, and if other people are to hear it, I think that they would enjoy it. And I know that I would enjoy it. And so there's just kind of a lot of reasons for doing it. And so, it's been fun to do this. And, there was a part of me that just kind of realized, I'm like, if I want to do a podcast, just do a podcast. Whenever you are doing something like this, you're putting yourself out there a little bit. Whenever you are speaking to a large group or you're recording something like this that's going to be listened to by others, or if you're writing something or trying to read a book or anything along those lines, you're putting yourself out there. You can't really help but have this sense of what are other people going to think. I was actually a little nervous to start this podcast, believe it or not. And, looking back now, and probably for many people that heard this, they would just say, why would you be nervous? Like, who cares? Just do it. Because you can't help but be a little self-conscious on like, what do other people think of what are other people going to think of me? What are they going to think of this? Or what if it sounds stupid? Or what if it's just kind of silly or anything like that? And, I'll just kind of say this. I've heard before, and I think there's a lot of truth to this. And don't take this the wrong way because it sounds a little harsh, but I think it's just sometimes we all need a little dose of reality. And that is, no one really cares what you do. And you need to think about how you view others for a minute when you think this through. So when someone else does something like starting a new hobby, and it could be anything, do you judge them in a negative way? I bet you do not do that, or at least you don't think you do. When you know someone who starts a new hobby, it could be a podcast, it could be they write something, it could be just a new adventure, it could be anything. Do you look at them negatively? I bet you don't. I bet you look at them and think, that's kind of cool. Or, whatever floats their boat, you might think it's cool. You may be indifferent about it. In other words, you may not really care necessarily. It doesn't mean anything negative. It doesn't mean you look down upon it. But it's just like, hey, if that's what they want to do, good. I'm glad that they're doing it. Now, I will say with something like this, like a podcast, for example, something where again you're kind of expressing yourself to some degree. It is maybe a little bit different. You are putting yourself out there a little bit. You might be getting out of your comfort zone to some degree. And having a little bit of self-reflection to say, hey, I wonder what other people are going to think about this is a healthy thing. You have to just simply have some self-awareness on the things that you're doing. And if you decide you're going to say something that's a little bit crazy or edgy or controversial, you need to think a little bit about how people are going to reply to that. Are you okay that people know this about you? Are you okay with that? I'm not one that really wants to rock the boat in that way. And so that's not the take that I'm going to have. So if you do care about what other people think, that may be kind of important too. But you also have to think of it this way too. As everyone always says, when it comes to social media, what do people say? What is it we always tell kids about things that they put on social media? Be careful what you put on social media because it's going to live out there forever, right? It could live out there forever. Maybe there's ways to take something down or a statement or a comment or something like that. But in theory, it potentially could live out there forever. And that's the same with something like a podcast if you're recording it and hosting it on some sort of a public platform. So you do want to think just a little bit about that, but you also just can't get too nervous or too wrapped in your head. So, easy to think. Also, would I stick with this when I start the podcast? Will I have what it takes to actually kind of keep going through with it? What if I start and realize it actually stinks? You think for the amount of time I put into this, will I feel like I'm getting something out of it? That's a big question. What's the reason? What's the reason for doing this? And is it for my own self-satisfaction? Is it because I want to try to eventually make money on this or something someday? Who knows what the reasons could be? So you do have to kind of think all those things through. But at the end of the day, it's just something I wanted to do. It's just something I wanted to try, and it sounded fun. It sounded enjoyable. And honestly, it kind of sounded like a way for me. It felt like a way, maybe a better way to say it, for me to give back a little bit. I am not one that's going to fall under any guise that this is going to be the most popular podcast ever or that everyone's going to listen to this or anything like that. But I will say I have had some really nice compliments from people, from some friends or people or acquaintances, both on social media or in person, that just say, hey, I listen to your podcast and I've really enjoyed it. A handful of people, well, of course, mostly friends or family, are like, I've listened to all your podcasts. Hey, I really enjoy hearing that. It does lift my spirits a little bit. And yes, it does give me motivation to keep going. When you hear some positive encouragement, it helps. I actually had one of the nicest compliments the other day. I went to my best friend's son's high school graduation reception or a little party thing or whatever. And I've been able to watch him grow up, and it's just been a really cool experience. And now he's graduating high school, and I remember when he was born. I remember when I found out that my best friend and his wife were expecting a baby, and how exciting it was. And now here I'm seeing him graduating high school and going off to college and doing great things. And he listened to he made a comment to me. He's like, "Hey, I listened to one of your podcasts the other day. I was not expecting to hear this from, a high school graduate, high school student." And he said, "Hey, listen to that podcast the other day that you had with Marion Dare, and really enjoyed it. I thought you asked really good questions, and it was fun for me to hear because I hope to go be in Hollywood someday, and I want to direct or produce movies." And I was like, "That is so cool." Now, for those of you who have not listened to the podcast with Marion Dare, feel free to check it out. It is a podcast where I interviewed Marion, and she's a writer and producer in Hollywood, and directs and all of that, and all of those great things that you think of with kind of content creation for shows and all of that. She's from Superior, Nebraska. So great podcast. Feel free to check that out. But it was such a nice compliment to hear that. And it just kind of, it kind of boosted my spirits. I was like, thank you. So David, I just want to tell you, thank you for that simple little compliment. It's always nice to hear those words. And if anything else, let that be a lesson just for all of us. I know it is for me. Just when you hear things like that, it's, oh, thank you. And you know what? When you hear those comments, go ahead and pay that forward to other people too, and give those compliments to others too. Because again, when they're putting themselves out there and trying something, always nice to give some words of encouragement and everything. So, this podcast has really been kind of an absolute blast. I've really enjoyed it. I am embarrassed to say that I have not posted an episode in several weeks. I don't know if it's been 3 weeks. I hope it's not been 4. It's been longer than I like to admit. It's a little embarrassing. But, I got to say this. When you have a busy life, it can be difficult. It's just like any other hobby. I would compare it to people who talk about going to the gym. How often do you hear people say, "Oh, I was getting into working out," or "I was doing so good, but I've been bad about going to the gym lately. I kind of fell off the wagon here just a little bit." It's not that they wanted to fall off the wagon. It's just that life got busy. They got tired. They got things going on. They got work. They got family. They've got other obligations. Or sometimes they're just a little worn out and they just don't have the energy to put into it at the moment. That's how it's been for me kind of in this journey. And it has been at times a little bit of a struggle because I'll be honest, I think about this podcast every single day. I wish that I had kind of what it took to post a new episode once or twice a week. I would love it if I could get to that point where I could at least do one per week. I've been averaging since January about once every other week or every 2 weeks approximately. I've had some times where I've posted one per week for several weeks, and then I'll take maybe 2 to 3 weeks off. And sometimes I have longer stretches. But I've got a busy job. I often work late or I have to work on weekends. Sometimes it's oftentimes just like checking my email or staying late at work. And by the time you get home, you do dinner, you do dishes. I like to walk the dog with my wife at night. It's awesome. I want to sit with the kids and kind of talk to them about how their day's going. And then there's just those nights where I'm just tired and I just kind of need to watch some TV or veg out or read a little bit or do something because like anything else, you get busy and you get tired, and all of us have experienced this. I know that you have experienced it too. I know you've experienced it with new things that you want to start, whether it's simply an activity, a hobby, running an errand, wanting to fix something around your house. It could be any number of things, because we've all been there. Everybody knows what that's like. And so I'll just say this. My goal is to eventually kind of get back to where I'm posting an episode either every week or maybe every other week, perhaps too. Here's another little observation I've kind of had. When I listen to other podcasts of that are kind of the famous, the popular ones, I will say, done by people who are maybe more celebrity hosts of some sort, or just more well known, or anything. Maybe they've written some books or whatever reason they're popular. I can't help but compare myself a little bit to them. We all compare ourselves just a little bit. I'm not saying I'm like them or even as good as them. I don't know. I'll let anyone else be the judge of that. But I can't help but think to myself, when they're doing the podcast, this is what they do. They don't have a normal job. They don't have a busy life like I have. I have the busy life. I have a job that's 8 to 5, but often takes me till after 5 o'clock, or takes me into certain evenings, nights, and weekends occasionally, or just wears me out more. Who knows? I don't spend my day working on this, and I don't get paid to do this or anything like that too. So who knows? I'm sure it's up in the air. When you hear these other podcasters out there, for some of them, yeah, they probably may not be as busy as what I am or what you are, and whatever a full-time job would be, or maybe they are. I don't know. I don't know their life. But you just can't help but really think to yourself, you just got to do the best you can and just kind of go with it. And if it's something that you enjoy and something that you kind of believe in, you just kind of have to run after it a little bit. So I will say this, I'm going to be keeping this podcast going through the summer. I'll be taking some breaks. I'm going to actually be heading out on vacation next week. I'm super excited. I can't believe it. My wife and I are celebrating our 20-year anniversary next week. I absolutely cannot believe it. It's amazing how fast time goes by. On one hand, you can't just help but be proud of it when you've been with a spouse, or somebody that you love so much, and you've been with them for this long. It also, you can't help but be a little sheepish about it. You're like, whoa, kind of means I'm getting just a little bit old. But on the other hand, you just can't help but be excited. And I'm super excited. We're heading to Nashville, and we're actually taking our first vacation. We're taking the kids kind of with us part way to stay with some family, and then just my wife and I are going to go to Nashville for a few days. It is the first vacation that just her and I have had together in a very long time. I honestly would have to really sit down and think about the last time her and I went on a trip and didn't have kids with us. And so what better time to do it than for our 20-year anniversary, and to celebrate all the great years we've had together and all of those things. It's pretty wild. So I just want to say, for those of you who have listened to any of these episodes at all the episodes, a couple episodes, or whatever, thank you for listening to this podcast. I'm kind of excited to sort of be at this place where, I've gone through, I live in the academic world. I work on a college campus, and so I break my life up into semesters, into summers, just like kids do in school. Okay, so. But I love knowing that I've really gone from kind of early January all the way here through late May, pretty much a whole spring semester, if you will. And so kind of from my point of reference, I can't help but just sort of think like, this was sort of what I've been doing sort of for the spring term, because that's kind of the world that I live in. And so it's been a lot of fun. I'll probably take it just a little bit lighter over the summer, but I'm not going to totally go away. And then I'm going to kind of resume it back again. I'm working on some outlines and content items. The brain is always moving. I got the juices flowing kind of all the time. So I think I'm still finding my rhythm with this, but I just love every opportunity to connect with other people. I'll also say this. Feel free to locate me on Facebook, either directly. Most of you, if you've made it this far into this podcast episode, you probably know me on Facebook. So feel free to reach out to me directly if you want to. I do have a group called How to Speak Nebraskan. Also, feel free, if you have an idea of somebody for me to interview, just shoot me a message directly or on Facebook or whatever. Feel free to go to my website. I do have a website, howtospeaknebraskan.com. It is not the most engaging website. It's like one of those kind of websites you go to and you're like, oh, this is it. But you can actually message me through that, and it sends me an email. And so you can message me through that. I kind of have these like kind of thoughts and goals like, oh, I hope that my website's more kind of engaging and user-friendly someday. I hope at some point, but I'm really not there yet. You can also send me something on X. That's right, the former Twitter. You still say tweet on X? I don't know what you're supposed to say. My handle is @SpeakNebraskan, so you can do that as well. So feel free to message me if you ever have an idea of anything you want me to talk about, if you want me to interview someone. Heck, if you even want to be interviewed, you've got a story to share, feel free. I've actually got a running list of people who I am interested in interviewing. Sometimes I look at it and I see names I put on there a long time ago that I'm like, I'm not interested in them anymore. But I still see names that I'm like, I really want to reach out to that person. I'm actually always periodically kind of adding names. I maybe want to interview this person at some point and see if I get a time to get around to that too. So anyway, thank you for that. And just to kind of wrap things up, to give you a few words of encouragement, here is something I just would like to say. Just keep being awesome, okay? One of my good coworker friends used to sometimes say, I don't know if he actually said this frequently. I heard him say it at least once, and I thought it was a really nice thing. And occasionally I'll say it to people too. One of my coworker friends used to say, "Don't worry about what other people think because you're kind, smart, and important." And I was like, you know what? That's a really nice thing to say. If you're kind, smart, and important, you just gotta do your thing and do the best you can and go with it. So keep being your great self. Thanks for listening. I can't wait to connect with you again. This is How to Speak Nebraskan.